I've made a change within my portfolio, an allocation change into a fund, the fund that I'm going to invest most into over the course of the next few years, and I'm going to explain exactly why. For me, this is probably one of the best funds there is out there in terms of getting global exposure to entire markets to make sure your diversification is across the world. And I want to show you all the details of how I've come to that decision and what are the specifics around the fund involved. One that I believe would suit a vast majority of people looking to get global exposure that just want to drip in on a regular basis and retire pretty wealthy. We're so lucky to live in the time that we do. All world funds have really only been around since the 1990s, and probably only over the last 5, 6, maybe 10 years max have we had access to really good, really cheap brokers in the UK. On top of that, we've got an ISA, which means that we can have £20,000 worth of investment protected by tax every single year. I say it in every video, but I think it is one of the best financial products that exists in the world. Therefore, I think it is easier and cheaper now more than ever to set yourself up with a plan in order to help you reach your financial goals, whatever they may be: financial independence, grow wealth, save money for a house, whatever it is. I think we're at a time now where it is easier than ever. But with all of this growth, with all of these opportunities that have been created, comes choice. An overwhelming amount of choice where to start. One of the questions I get asked most often is, what fund shall I invest into? Now, at this point, I've got a caveat. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not in a position where I'm able to advise you what you should be investing into. This is not a recommendation to invest into this fund. This is what I'm doing. I'm explaining the reasons why. Your circumstances might be different. If you do need financial independent advice, I suggest you go seek it. This is just my view alone. So at the moment, there's hundreds literally of different funds available to you to choose, which cover the entire world. And the reason that there are so many is because money can be made from you buying these funds. So there is a management fee for any fund that you buy across the world, not just in the UK. There's always a management fee. It's a very small amount, but when you are holding trillions of pounds worth of people's money in these funds, it can very quickly add up to a lot of cash. So products get created all the time, put onto the market. They also get taken off the market if they're not performing as well as they could be. And a lot of companies do this in the background without letting you know, so that it doesn't influence their numbers in terms of how they've performed. So all of these fees that can be made means that there's more and more products made all the time, and some of them are better than others. So it's important to cut through the crap and work out which ones are actually the most suitable for you and your investment. They also intentionally make these things more complicated than they actually are. They use language that we're probably unfamiliar with, and they do that on purpose to scare you, to make you think that you need their help in order to do these things. They do that so that they make more money at the end of the day. So it's important to understand some criteria in terms of what exactly are we looking for when we're looking to buy an all-world fund. Now, some people might say, well, I just want to invest into the S&P 500. If you want to do that, that's absolutely fine. I too hold a considerable allocation of my wealth within the S&P 500. However, what I'm looking to do over the course of the next few years is make sure that that's balanced across the entire world. And there is some duplication. So some of the S&P 500, a lot of the S&P 500 will be in the all world. And that's because America has done extremely well over the last few decades. So it takes up a significant chunk because it is weighted by success. And all funds are weighted by success, which is why you have the Magnificent Seven at the top of the S&P 500, and that's why you have a lot of the US businesses at the top of an all-world fund. Now, that might not necessarily always be the case. Who's to know? It could be in less than 10 years' time that China continues to grow and significantly overtakes the US. India could do the same. There could be geopolitical changes throughout the world that completely change that we never even knew about. Look at 5 years ago. 5 years ago, would you have predicted a global pandemic, inflation at 10%? War in Europe? All of these sort of things are very hard to predict, and therefore no one typically ever does. So unless you are a palm reader or whatever it is these people do, it's very hard to understand exactly what's going to happen. And even the professionals get it wrong significantly more often than they get it right. So I don't anticipate that I'm going to be able to predict what's going to happen in any given part of the world, any geopolitical impacts, any environmental impacts, whatever they may be. I don't pretend to be able to understand or predict what they're going to be. So for me, the best way to invest for my financial independence is to invest across the entire globe. So key criteria are things that we're looking for. Number one, not actively managed. Why not actively managed, and what does it mean? Actively managed means exactly that. It is managed actively by someone going in, picking stocks, deciding which ones they think are going to do well, deciding which ones they think are going to do bad, taking them out, and managing that portfolio on your behalf. I don't want that for two reasons. First of all, those funds typically, I say typically, over 99% of the time underperform the market. So they don't do as well as they say they will. And secondly, it costs more. So you're paying more for funds that do worse. It costs more because you're paying for people to be buying and selling individual businesses in and out of the fund. And they want to take a cut as well. And they take a significant cut. So for me, no thanks. I don't want actively managed funds. Second thing, I do want the entire world. I don't just want specific regions. I don't want specific sectors or regions taken out. I don't want to be missing out on the developed world. I don't want to be missing out on Asia. I don't want to be missing out on pharma. I don't want to be missing out on automotive. I don't want a heavy weighting into any one of those given things. So I want an all-world fund that genuinely is all world, the entire world. So when you get to that point, there aren't that many funds that are unfiltered, that can include the developing world, the developed world, every sector, every geography. You're actually got yourself down to a position when there's not too many. Next off, I want it to be based in Ireland, the UK, or Luxembourg. And the reason for that is because I want it to be in pounds sterling, because that's what I earn, that's what I have in my bank account. And I also want it to be that because it means it's not a foreign fund. And when you have a foreign fund, if it pays any dividends, you're going to pay a withholding tax, and that is quite significant. That can be up to 15% of the dividend that is paid. You don't want to be losing that. I want to be getting my dividends, reinvesting them straight back in, and I want to be getting the full value for those dividends. Then I want the fees to be as cheap as possible, because that can cost you a fortune in the long run if you don't get that right. The cheap fees in terms of the fund itself, cheap fees in terms of the platform itself. So I'm looking for a fund that is cheap on a platform that is cheap. That means I'm looking for an old cap fund. And typically the way funds work is they track an index. So we're looking for funds that are going to track against an index accurately. And in reality, these days, most of them do. They can't afford not to, because if they're way off what the index is doing, then most people are not going to invest into them. So you can compare what a fund is doing versus the index. You can very easily look that up. They need to be available on the platforms that I use. So I use, historically in the past, I've used Hargreaves Lansdown. I don't use that anymore. It's too expensive for me, but I use Trading 2 and 2. I use InvestEngine. And I use a couple of other ones that I'm playing around with at the moment as well. So most importantly for me is Trading 2 and 2 and InvestEngine. It's on there. Does it pay a dividend? Now that's important to me. It might not be to you. It depends upon which stage you are with your investment journey, and it depends upon your psychology. So for me, I love to get a dividend because I love to see that cash come in. I do then use it to then buy back in to reinvest those dividends, so I get that compounding growth. You can get the same fund that doesn't pay the dividend. It's called an accumulation fund. And that will reinvest the dividends for you in the background. No admin required whatsoever. You don't even need to think about it. So if you want to be completely hands-off, you want one without a dividend, you're looking for an accumulation one. I want a distribution one is what they're called. A distribution fund that pays me a dividend because I just like to see it come in. Given all of that criteria, it basically means there's one fund that fits. And it is the Invesco FTSE All World UCITS ETF, ticker symbol FTWG. So that's the distribution version of the fund. If you want an accumulation one, it's FWRG. Check that. I'll get me letters wrong. FWRG is the accumulation one. That one automatically reinvest the dividends for you if you're interested in that. So it delivers against all of those criteria, and it is also much cheaper than the Vanguard equivalent. It comes in at 0.15% fee. And again, just to explain the way that fees work on funds, you don't have to pay it at the end of the year. You don't have to pay it monthly. Within your broker, it'll automatically happen in the background. So it's not an admin piece you need to worry about. But they do that on purpose to hide the more expensive ones. So the most important thing is to make sure that's as low as possible. This is 0.15 fee. It's a third cheaper than the Vanguard equivalent. Now, the cost is massively important because over the course of an investing career, a slight difference in percentage point over the course of a career in fees will have a massive impact on your returns. Over 30 years is going to end up being tens of thousands of pounds. So it's significant. It's worth looking at and making sure you get right up front. Now, this Invesco fund is only a year old. It is a new boy. Right, it is. A lot of these funds are coming out to try and compete with Vanguard because they haven't moved much in price recently. So it is new, but Invesco is a massive company, £1.5 trillion in assets under management. So it's not like they're small. You don't need to worry about them going under. They're going to be around for a while. That's significantly grown over the last few months as well, and I think it's going to continue to grow the amount of investment that there is into the fund. So I'm not concerned about it. I'm dripping into it as much as I possibly can over the course of the next year at least. Now, in terms of one fund that you can potentially retire off and just drip into monthly, that's exactly what I'm doing. Your circumstances might be different, but that's what I'm doing. So this is my holding right here. I will show it to you. I've said I'm not going to be going over portfolio updates going forward too much, but this is the holding I have here. I'm going to be looking at increasing it into it. I'm going to be maxing it out. I'm going to be using my ISA basically to max it out in the next year. Right, if you haven't already, there's a link below in the bio and the description, whatever it is, for a newsletter. I send an email out once every couple of weeks, maximum. I don't spam. Just to give you updates in terms of any financial products that are looking good, any news. I share my free dividend tracker as the last thing I did So no spam guarantee. It's just to keep in contact with you guys. You can email me back as well if you like. So there's a link below if you want that. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed the video. I look forward to seeing you all again soon.